Well, I am happy to be here with each and every one of you on this Sunday. I'm excited about this sermon. This is one of those, I'm telling you now, get your pen and paper out, get your journal out. You want to take notes. This is one of those that you're going to want to come back to over and over again. But before I get ahead of myself, let us ground ourselves with a centering prayer. And so I invite you to repeat after me. I welcome the Spirit of truth into my mind and let it grow in my heart. Thank you, God, in me, through me, and as me. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. So it must be. Wonderful. Well, we begin our series, Prosper 2025, Joy, Wellbeing, Connection, and Abundance, by looking at joy. Last week's message, I Still Have Joy. And we talked about what joy really is, that joy is an expression of love. And as we love ourselves more and more, we naturally develop inner joy. And we talked about the fact that joy, like love, is unconditional. Joy is power. Joy is persistent. We also talked about the idea that joy makes you compassionate. Joy manifests effortless miracles, and joy expands your capacity to love. If you missed that message, of course, it's available here on YouTube and you can tap into that. But I want to move forward as we are looking at joy, well-being, connection, and abundance, as we are setting the intention and endeavor and know that we will prosper in 2025. If you have been part of the CSC community for any length of time, you've heard me say many times that here at CSC, we do not teach the prosperity gospel. We teach the gospel of well-being. And that distinction is important. It's important because, unfortunately, there are some new thought ministries that teach the prosperity gospel, which I think is highly problematic. And there are some new thought teachers that have been erroneously dismissed as simply prosperity preachers by those who ignorantly lump any preacher or teacher who talks about prospering in the here and now as the prosperity gospel. So in short, I think it's first helpful for us to understand what the prosperity gospel is. The prosperity gospel always has three very common features. One, the prosperity gospel teaches God wants you to be rich and wealthy. Two, the prosperity gospel teaches give money to your church, to your pastor, to the prophet, and God will bless you because of that. And finally, the prosperity gospel teaches that being rich and wealthy are signs that you are blessed and favored by God. Now, as with all teachings, there are different flavors and expressions, but you will always find those three key components in the prosperity gospel. But this is not new thought. New thought teaches and talks about prosperity, but new thought is not the prosperity gospel. Again, at Celebration Spiritual Center, we teach what I've coined the gospel of well-being. So what is the gospel of well-being? Well, first, this sermon is we're going to do a deep dive, but I encourage you to also tap into some sermon series that we've taught in the past. One, Well-Being Abounds, is a wonderful sermon series to tap into. Well Not Woke is a good sermon series to tap into. The 7 Habits of Prosperous People is a good series. And also Embracing Wholeness is another good series. So as you're writing and taking in everything that I'm sharing today, and you want to deepen your study, you want to widen your understanding, I encourage you to revisit any one of those sermon series as you are developing your understanding of what the gospel of well-being is. So as we use a term, the gospel of well-being, I think one of the things that's important is just to break down the term just on its base level, right? Gospel is a Greek word. And gospel simply means good news. And well-being is prosperity. Well-being, I like to say, is happiness, health, success, and money. Because if you think about it, if you're not happy, you're not well. If you're not healthy, you're not well. If you're not successful, you're not well. And if you don't have money or don't have enough money, you're not well. Now, I know those last two statements might be triggering, right? If you're not successful, you're not well. If you don't have money, you're not well. But let's think about this, right? Success, and I love how Earl Nightingale defines success, is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And he uses in the example, he says that the person that decides to become a teacher and is a teacher is successful. So you see, that has nothing to do with wealth or status, right? So you are successful to the extent that you are doing, being, or having what you intended to do, be, or have. Success has nothing to do with status. Success has nothing to do with wealth. The success has nothing to do with accumulation. And so if you're not being, doing, or having what you intended or desired to be, do, or have, we could surmise that you would most likely be sad, mad, disappointed, or maybe frustrated. Thus, you wouldn't be well. You wouldn't be experiencing well-being. Hope we understand that. And so as far as money goes, although it may be triggering to hear me say, if you don't have money, you're not well, if you've ever had the experience of not having enough or any money to take care of your needs, I think we can agree you were not well during that time. And what I mean is you were stressed out. You were scared. You were sad. You were frustrated. You might have been resentful. You might have been mad at somebody. You might have experienced sleepless nights. You might have been constantly worried. You might have been preoccupied with how to get more money, which means you weren't focused on all of the other beautiful things of life. We had the reading today when we opened the service today about gratitude and understanding that when we practice gratitude, we're seeing that there's more going on than even our present circumstances. And it allows us to access joy and love and so many things. We also know that in our society, without money, our health suffers and on and on. If you don't have enough money, you will not be well. You will not be experiencing well-being. That's just a fact. So the goal of the gospel of well-being is happiness, health, success, and money. So the question becomes, how do we achieve this goal? And how we achieve this is by understanding the 5 pillars of complete prosperity. 1, prosperity consciousness. 2, God consciousness. 3, prosper on purpose. 4, give and prosper. And 5, prosper together. So let's start with number 1, prosperity consciousness. First, we must understand what prosperity is. Now, I said earlier, prosperity is well-being, and I'm going to espouse even more as we move through this message of ways that we can understand and define prosperity. But understanding what prosperity is and what the goals of happiness, success, health, and money are important and part of developing a prosperity consciousness. And the first thing we must understand is that prosperity is not being rich or getting rich. PY said the very same thing in the meditation as she was supporting us with this month's meditative idea. It's not about money. It's not about stuff. I love how Eric Butterworth defines it. I come back to this over and over again. Spiritual economics. That's another series you could go back to. Also, you could go to our masterclass from 2020, Thrive, which we taught page by page, line by line, spiritual economics. And in that text, Eric Butterworth says or writes, prosperity is a way of living and thinking, and not just money or things. Poverty is a way of living and thinking, and not just a lack of money or things. So what this means, as we're developing our prosperity consciousness and understanding what it is, there are financially wealthy people that are poor. And there are financially poor people that are prosperous. So you see already that this is why this is not the prosperity gospel, right? Because the prosperity gospel says that if you have a whole bunch of money and things, then God loves you and you're blessed by God. What the gospel of well-being says that even if you don't have a whole lot of money, you can still be prosperous when you have a prosperity consciousness. Oh my goodness. So money or things do not indicate prosperity. The 5 pillars of complete prosperity is a very deliberate term that I use. Complete prosperity. Because if we understand that we're talking about the five: prosperity consciousness, God consciousness, prosper on purpose, give and prosper, prosper together. If you are missing or weak or stagnant in any one of those five pillars, you are not living in or experiencing complete prosperity. You may be experiencing some prosperity. You may be experiencing some type of prosperity, some version of prosperity, but it's not complete. And the goal is complete prosperity. The other key here is understanding that in order to get to our goal of happiness, health, success, and money, we have to address our thinking. And so what we think, believe, expect, accept, and allow determines the expression and experience of prosperity in our lives. Again, this is why Eric Butterworth says that prosperity is a way of living and thinking, and not just money or things. And so that means that then a poverty consciousness is a way of living and thinking. And again, I can't say it enough. There are millionaires and billionaires that are not prosperous. There are people with a whole lot of things and homes and houses and things. They're not prosperous. And therefore, they are not experiencing well-being. So we must develop a prosperity consciousness by understanding what prosperity is and understanding that it is a way of thinking, believing, expecting, accepting, and allowing. And then, along with that, we must develop a God consciousness. Your concept, understanding, and beliefs about God determine your expression and experience of prosperity. Now, the Gospel of Wellbeing invites you to see God anew. In many cases, you'll need to throw out your old understanding of God and develop a new understanding of God. And what is that new understanding? That God is not a being, a person, or a personality. God does not judge or avenge or punish, or as the late Bishop Carlton Pearson would say, have an anger management problem. God is love, and love is unconditional. Now, that's right there in the text. Many of you, my Bible folks, you've been reading the Bible and hearing these texts all your life. In Psalms, you read the translation, his loving kindness endureth forever, or his mercy endureth forever. The better translation of that word mercy is actually loving kindness. So if God's loving kindness endureth forever, then God is not condemning, God is not judging. If God's loving kindness endureth forever, then there can't be some lake of fire called hell where God condemns you to, because that would be the opposite of loving kindness enduring forever. The hell is neither loving nor kind. God is spirit. God is omnipresence. What does that mean? That means so often we hear when God is just talked about as a person or personality, God is described as omnipresent, like Santa Claus. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake, right? But God is omnipresence, which means God is everywhere and everything. God is omniscience. God is all wisdom and knowledge. So God is not all knowing. Knowledge itself is God. Wisdom itself is God. Intelligence itself is God. That means that then anytime that you are expressing wisdom and intelligence, expressing knowledge, you are expressing God. God is omnipotence, not just omnipotent. God is not powerful. God is not the strongest being in the pantheon of gods, and so that's why God wins. No, God is power itself. And understanding that God is power itself and we are one with God when we plug in, just like we plug in any of our devices and there's power back and behind it that empowers your device, that's what God is. Omnipotence, not just the strongest God of all gods. That's corny. You know what I'm saying? That's really corny because that's like egocentric. And so I invite you, as you want to learn and expand your God consciousness, and if you're hearing me share these things about God for the very first time, this is where you must go to Lessons in Truth. There's another sermon series, I believe it's the Way of the Master Manifester is the sermon series where we focused on this text, but Lessons in Truth by Dr. Emily H. Cady. And particularly the second lesson, Statement of Being, who and what God is, who and what man is. She breaks down these ideas that God is life, that God is spirit, that God is omniscience, that God is omnipotence, that God is That's actually very important. God is. Because it's important to understand that in this teaching and in the gospel of well-being, we do not deny the experience and the expression of God. But what's interesting is that the God consciousness that we're talking about is something that even an atheist can embrace. Because so often what atheists are really against is that mean, vengeful, judging person or personality that folks have ascribed to God or called God. But what's so beautiful is we recognize that God is, it is a presence. I love to say that God is an action word, and that even comes from a Hebrew understanding of God. So it's not a being that we need to believe in, but it is a reality that we get to accept. Additionally, to develop and tap into a deeper understanding of your God consciousness, last year we did a powerful series, Tell Me About Your God, using the teachings of Emmett Fox and breaking down who and what God is. And what's so powerful about that series, you're going to hear things about who and what God is that's counter to your the former understanding of God. Good, because again, the second pillar of complete prosperity is getting rid of that old God consciousness and developing a new God consciousness, developing a new understanding of God, which will benefit you greatly as you seek to experience happiness, success, health, and money. And so then we get to the third pillar, prosper on purpose. Now, the gospel of well-being is not simply an intellectual exercise. You hear PY say that and share that with us in the meditation experience each and every week. We learn and unlearn so that we may put it into practice. So the first two pillars, a lot of people just get stuck there. And this is why I say then you don't have complete prosperity. You're just learning about God. You're just learning about prosperity. You're just reading. Your libraries are filled, and you can argue with somebody about why their God is problematic or not really God. You can argue with somebody about the scriptures, right? This is why the point we use the Bible many times just to heal a former understanding or to expand and create a new understanding, but not to be argumentative, right? Not to debunk somebody's, thoughts or ideas about Christianity or the Bible, but simply to liberate ourselves, to liberate our own hearts and minds. And so as we're learning and unlearning, then this third pillar, prosper on purpose, is where we apply the practical spirituality that we're learning. It is applicable and must be applied. So to prosper on purpose then is to purposely and intentionally use tools and practices to support us in our goal of happiness, health, success, and money. Now, one of the guiding principles of Celebration Spiritual Center is daily spiritual practice is not an option. And the reason why, as PY and I founded this ministry, the reason why this was so incredibly important is because one of the things that our lives have demonstrated us to be true is that having a daily, deliberate, consistent, no matter what spiritual practice is the difference maker as we move through life. Because life, we're going to have all kinds of different experiences, right? Some days we're going to be sad. Some days we're going to be glad, right? Some days we're going to have enough money. Some days we're not going to have enough money, right? All kinds of wonderful things are going to happen in this experience, human experience of life. And we recognize that if you have no anchor, if you're not tethered to anything, and if you do not remember the truth of who and what you are, then you're just going to be blowing around like a plastic bag in the wind. And so what we know to be true, and what I know to be true, is that daily spiritual practice leads to happiness. Daily spiritual practice leads to health. Daily spiritual practice leads to success, and daily spiritual practice leads to money. What is daily spiritual practice, or the DSP? It is a simple method, the 5-5-5 method. 5 minutes of meditation, 5 minutes of affirmative journaling, and 5 minutes of inspirational reading. Now, if you've never heard about this daily spiritual practice, that's exciting to me because your life will change as you choose to practice this. On the homepage of our YouTube channel, if you go to the classes and events section, we taught an entire class on this, and in there, there's also, you can access and download a study guide. We give you tips on how to practice 5 minutes of meditation using breathing exercises. We give you tips and break down what affirmative journaling is and give you writing prompts. We give you a list of books that you can use for your 5 minutes of inspirational reading. But what we find so often is that people tend to fall off of their daily spiritual practice. It's one of the questions that we ask so often when we're working with folks in class, when we're working with folks one-on-one. They're having some challenges, they're having some issues. The first question, how's your daily spiritual practice? Inevitably, the response, oh, well, and usually this practice tends to fall off after life starts getting good and the problem has been solved or the immediate crisis is over. And I think the reason for this is that a lot of times you hear about the daily spiritual practice and you start to use it because you want your life to change. But somewhere there's a connection that's been made that I use my daily spiritual practice to get something or to attract something or to manifest something. But the DSP is not for getting. Your daily spiritual practice is for becoming and for being. To quote Emily Cady again, Dr. H. Emily Cady, she says that doing is secondary to being. And I would go further to say that manifesting is secondary to being. Getting is secondary to being. Attracting is secondary to being. See, your daily spiritual practice is daily spiritual hygiene. And what you're doing each day is reconnecting and remembering the truth of who you are. And I was thinking about it, a lot of times, if you're using your daily spiritual practice just in moments of crisis or when there's a problem or when things are going bad or when there's a breakup, right? That would be like someone who has a car in their driveway and says, I'm going to put gas in the car when I'm ready to use the car. And we know that that's not possible. You wouldn't even be able to get to the gas station if there's no gas in the car. It would be like someone saying, oh, well, I will charge my iPhone when I want to use it. It's like, but that's not how it works, because first, if you haven't used it, you're going to plug it in and you got to wait for it to get enough charge to even turn on. But if you need to leave the house, you're going to have to leave it plugged in long enough before you can leave the house. So you've lost so much time. But this is what so many people are doing with their daily spiritual practice. It's not forgetting. It is your daily spiritual hygiene. It's for being and becoming. And so, as I just said, what you're doing each day, you're reconnecting and remembering the truth of who you are. And what it reminded me of, and this may be an old school reference depending on how old you are, but it reminds me of a famous movie from the 80s, Splash, starring Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks. It's a wonderful, fun little comedy, rom-com, if you've never seen it. It's wonderful. And in the movie, Tom Hanks falls in love with a mermaid. And so she comes out of the ocean and they're trying to have a relationship, right, out in the world, in New York. And there's a scene that speaks to what I'm thinking about now. There's a scene where, she's out here in the human world. She has a human body. She has legs, right? She doesn't have the fins of a mermaid. But that's not who she is, right? That's not her natural way of being. And so while he's off at work, she fills the tub up with water. She pours a bunch of salt in the water and she gets in the tub and we see as the scene in the movie where she flips out her fins and you could see she's like, I can be myself. I can tap in with myself because I'm finally experiencing what my natural normal environment is, and I can get rid of these things called legs, which really are cumbersome to me as a mermaid, right? And I can go back to my natural way of being. And so this is what our daily spiritual practice does for us. See, when we don't let our fins out, when we spend too much time out here being human, when we spend too much time out here being other than who we are, in this case, a mermaid, problems, pain, and trouble are inevitable. Hello, somebody. I know I just changed your life right there. Because that's what our daily spiritual practice is designed to do. See, when you close your eyes, when you meditate, when you go within, you're tapping into the truth of who you really are. You're a spiritual being having a human experience, just like she was a mermaid having a human experience. And eventually, if you try to only see and only act as if you're human, you're going to run into pain, problems, and trouble. Your DSP is just one tool when we think about Prosper on Purpose, but it encompasses so much. I could spend the rest of this message talking about the benefits of meditation and sitting in silence, but we'll talk about that later in the series when we talk about connection next week. So we have the first pillar, which is prosperity consciousness. We have the second pillar, which is God consciousness. The third pillar, prosper on purpose. The fourth pillar, give and prosper. Now, remember I said that the prosperity gospel teaches that giving to God is how you will be blessed. Giving to the church, to the pastor, the prophet is how you will find favor with God and be blessed. The gospel of well-being teaches giving as well. In fact, give is one of the 7 habits of prosperous people. But what we teach is radically different. Now, giving asks you to give of your time, talent, and treasure, aka money. Giving asks you to give to God, give to yourself, then give to others. And when it comes to giving money, it's very simple. Give where you're spiritually fed, give consistently, and give in love. Giving teaches the law of circulation. As you give, you receive, and that you must give to get. This again is why your daily spiritual practice is so fundamental. You're giving to yourself. You're filling your cup so that you can do what? Give to your world, give to your affairs, give to others. But there's another critical aspect of this pillar, give and prosper. In the sermon series, The 7 Habits of Prosperous People, I said this about giving. I said, you can't have prosperity without practicing forgiveness. And when I say you can't have prosperity without practicing forgiveness, what I'm saying is well-being, as we've talked about it, well-being as happiness, health, success, and money, you're not really going to experience that. You're not going to experience complete prosperity without practicing forgiveness. Notice that give is in the middle of the word, forgiveness. You can't experience good in your life. You can, rather, experience good in your life because the rain falls on the just and unjust. The sun shines on the just and unjust. Good always gets in, but prosperity is well-being. Prosperity is abundant flow. Prosperity is ease. Prosperity is it goes well with you. And without forgiveness, what you're going to end up doing for that good to come in, you're going to push, you're going to force, you're going to claw your way through life, and you will never get close to this well-being, abundant flow, and ease that I'm talking about, that the gospel of well-being is all about. Understanding forgiveness and practicing forgiveness is a necessary component of the gospel of well-being. I love to say that forgiveness is a success principle. We have many sermon series on forgiveness that you can find in the playlist on our YouTube channel. I believe there's definitely 2 sermon series dedicated to forgiveness and many sermons dedicated to forgiveness. And we can think about it this way, understanding what the gospel of well-being is. Unforgiveness affects your happiness. Unforgiveness affects your health. Unforgiveness affects your success, and unforgiveness affects your money. You may have never considered that. I'm a living witness that that's true. Couldn't understand what was going on in my life, and I couldn't break through ceilings of amounts of money that I wanted to make. When I did forgiveness work, when I leaned into that, my life changed, and I began to prosper in every area of my life: happiness, health, success, and money. I literally look different than I did now. PY loves to talk about that. She laughs about it all the time. She looks at you can look at pictures of me when I was living in that unforgiving place versus after. That's why I could write the song with so much joy, the vamp of Toward Our Wholeness, right? Now I am living abundantly. Living in what? Complete what? Prosperity. Now I am free to be all me in the flow of life. See, that's what that was about. I can't write, I can't teach about what I don't know. But that's what that was about. So we have 5 pillars. We've talked about the first 4: prosperity consciousness, God consciousness, prosper on purpose, give and prosper, and finally, prosper together. The mission and purpose of Celebration Spiritual Center states this: the mission and purpose of CSC is to awaken the world to the presence of God within and all around us. Celebrate this truth as one family. Embody unconditional love. Equip humanity to live our greatest lives and serve all creation. That second line, celebrate this truth as one family, is the prosper together pillar. See, the gospel of well-being simply says, don't do it alone. We learn together, we forgive together, we release together, and then we prosper together. Here at CFC, of course, that is done through the weekend service as we are connected together and we're connecting. I see you in the comments. It's powerful, right, as we connect in this way. We also have the God Talk, which is a wonderful way to connect. And that was echoed. So many of you have echoed how you appreciate the community that's created and hearing from and learning from each other through the God Talk. And then we have the same in classes. And that's another thing that I've heard over and over again, how connecting via community through the classes is supportive and helpful. See, you can learn a lot on your own, but you will learn even more with a teacher and in a community. Now, it has to be a loving space. It has to be a space that really occupies a certain way of being, right? And this is why in our mission and purpose, embody unconditional love is so very important as a part of who and what CSC is, also serving all creation, that we love each and every being as you are equally, because we recognize that that's how the God that held you in its mind and called you into being and thought you long enough, its good idea, sees you. How could we see you any other way? And so it's important that you're in a safe community. Right? This is one of the reasons why we talked a lot about that in the Job series last year, right? That it's important that we have safe spaces. And CSC continues to be that. Now, I was reminded, and you may have heard this, Pastor Yolanda shared this with me this week, that Oprah Winfrey is going to do a new series with Eckhart Tolle on the book A New Earth, something that she did. She had a masterclass with Eckhart Tolle back in 2008. And I remember when I left the traditional church, I had no home. I had no community. And I spent 7 years in what I call my own wilderness experience. It was necessary for me. There was a lot of learning and unlearning that was necessary. And then in 2008, Oprah has this masterclass with Eckhart Tolle. Now, I was familiar with The Power of Now, but had not read the book at that time. But I knew so many people were very much into Eckhart and we're, talking about his teachings. And so I was like, this is a wonderful opportunity. And so my best friend and I, we decided to walk through this masterclass experience together. For those of you that were part of it, it happened in the evenings, and you could watch it live and then watch the recordings later. And of course, we were reading chapter by chapter. And studying that book was life-changing for me. Absolutely life-changing for me. It literally helped change so much of my mindset and how I experience life and experience the world. I remember one of the most immediate sort of demonstrations that happened for me in the shift of my mind was as a performer. What always happened for me as a performer is that I wouldn't get nervous before performing, but my nervousness happened after the performance, because I was so in my head during the performance, judging and critiquing every note before it came out of my mouth. And then after the performance, I'm judging and critiquing everything that I did. And like, why'd you do that? That was stupid and that's terrible. And so there was just this inner critic that was cruel and awful. And I remember after going through the process of completing this book and completing the class and having a transformative experience, and I had a gig at the Sugar Bar, and I remember experiencing the inner peace. I remember experiencing being in the present moment, and that voice was gone. And that was enough for me. Like, that was enough. That was a powerful transformation. It changed my life. But I also remember as we were studying the text, I remember saying to my friend, I said, I think I'm going to find a church. And when I said that, I wasn't saying I'm going to look for a church, like I'm ready for a church home. I wasn't saying that. There was just this thought that rose up in me that said that I would find a church. And what was interesting, as I moved into the next year, 2009, through an interesting set of experiences, which is a whole nother story, I, on March 2009, entered the doors of Sacred Center, New York. And our mentor, Reverend August Gold, is the co-founder and the minister, was the minister of that spiritual center, which no longer exists today. But going to going to Sacred Center, New York, My life has never been the same. I mean, literally, without that moment, that day when I walked through the doors of Sacred Center, New York, there wouldn't be a Celebration Spiritual Center. This moment wouldn't happen. More importantly, while at Sacred Center, I leaned into every class I could take. Some were free, some were paid. I learned the power and practice of forgiveness and healed my mind. I began to give of my time and talents and treasure. I got off the sidelines of my life and got in the game of life, bringing my whole self. It was there that I met Pastor Yolanda. That's a great story. We could talk about it another time. It was there that we formed a mastermind with 5 other people based on the principles of Think and Grow Rich. And all 7 of us on this day are literally living the goals, plans, ideas, and dreams that we planted back then. In 2009 is when we started, the fall of 2009. So what I know to be true is that if you want to accelerate your prosperity, don't do it alone. Get with a friend, study together, get a prayer partner, pray together, get a gratitude partner, text your gratitudes to each other, form or join a mastermind, take a class, work with a coach, and of course, tap into this vibration of CSC week in and week out and go deeper. Rewatch sermons, rewatch series, take notes, get the books that we recommend, read the books. Definitely tap into the masterclass series, which we've been doing since 2020. Which is that's just gold to me. The masterclass series is gold. So the goal of the gospel of well-being is happiness, health, success, and money. The promise of the gospel of well-being is happiness, health, success, and money if you practice these 5 pillars. How do we achieve this goal? It is by practicing the 5 pillars of complete prosperity. 1, prosperity consciousness, understanding what prosperity is, knowing that it is a way of living and thinking. Prosperity is not wealth. It is not money or things. It is the consciousness that can attract money and things, but that's just part of the goal. Why? Because the goal is happiness, health, success, and money. If all you got is money, you ain't got much. But at the same time, understanding what it means to live in this human experience and that we need money, if all you have is just, well, I'm healthy, yes, that's good, but you need to be able to pay your mortgage, your rent. You need to be able to get to and fro. You need to be able to take that dream vacation, right? So money is beautiful and necessary, and we don't teach that money is bad at all. With our prosperity consciousness, we must have our God consciousness. The gospel of well-being teaches a radically new understanding of God that requires you to release the old God of your understanding and embrace a healed understanding of God. No longer is God a person or a personality. No longer is God outside of you or separate from you. No longer will you be afraid of God. No longer will you see yourself as sinful or broken or unworthy. You remain, as A Course in Miracles says, as God created you. The 3rd pillar, prosper on purpose. This is when we purposely begin to practice what it is that we are ingesting and learning and integrating. This is where we put the foundational understandings of a prosperity consciousness and a God consciousness into practice. We don't just talk about it or learn about it, we be about it. Your daily spiritual practice is spiritual hygiene. The goal is not to get. The goal is to be and become. The 4th pillar, give and prosper. The law of circulation teaches us that we must give to get. And as we give, we receive. So we give of our time, our talent, our treasure, aka money. We give where we are spiritually fed. We give consistently and we give in love. We give to God, we give to ourselves, then we give to others. We also practice forgiveness because we know it is a success principle. We know that forgiveness is not for God or to get right with God. Forgiveness is for us. We greatly benefit and keep the pathway clear for happiness, health, success, and money that comes with joy and ease. And finally, we prosper together. We celebrate this truth as one family. Here's a secret to successful living. If you want to accelerate your prosperity, don't do it alone. As I said, get with a friend, study together, get a prayer partner, pray together. I'll say that as well. Partners in Truth. Go to that sermon series, and I believe we even have just that portion of the sermon series is available on our YouTube channel of how to do a prayer partnership affirmatively and effectively. Get a gratitude partner. Text your gratitudes to each other. Form or join a mastermind. Take a class. Work with a coach. And of course, as you're already here, watch the live stream on Sundays and be a part of our online community and tap into this deep reservoir of teachings and healings and prayers and knowledge that is the YouTube channel of Celebration Spiritual Center. So we have declared this year is Prosper 2025. It is a year of joy, well-being, connection, and abundance. Next week, we'll be focusing on connection and what that means and looks like for us in 2025. I encourage you to come back to this message at some point this week and take some time to visit or revisit the sermons and sermon series that I mentioned today. For those who have been here for a while, you may recognize and see that all of our sermon series fall neatly into one or more of the 5 pillars of complete prosperity. This is by design, but I am so grateful. I think this is the first time that I've articulated it in this way to understand what it is that we teach at CSC, what CSC is all about. And of course, the demonstration of happiness, health, success, and money has been happening in our community since day one and continues to happen in powerful ways. And so I am so grateful and thankful for this word today. I am so grateful and thankful for each and every one of you. And so to these words of truth, I simply say, amen, ashe, and so it is.